this is back to the notes for 4 for tutorial 3. It's actually module 4, I think, but it's tutorial 3. So once again, you'll have to go back and do the missing textbook chapters separately. So after this, I'll probably just go back and start with chapter 1. What was missing. Then after that, you have to go do the examples from where you left off. And then once you do that, then start doing them one by one. So for example, for the next tutorial 4, when everything's got up, then you'll go back to 4, read the slides, or record the slides. Then you'll go to the textbook, find the missing ones, record those. Then you'll go back to textbook, record the examples. Then that's it. And then after all that, you'll want to also start looking to see if you can find the textbook answers. Because that other website's shut down, so you have to find another one. And then hopefully you can get those. Start with that. So this is the chocolate code. So pretty much this is just not really understanding how they're using div here, because the notes didn't explain it. I have to go back into the book and look at that. Not sure where they explained it. You can look somewhere else. There's a div class, points to row, points to column, points to column this, column that. So divide. Then class points to row. Then divide to close the block. So angle bracket slash header, angle bracket, new line, angle bracket div space class points to string row, angle bracket, new line, angle bracket slash div, angle bracket. So that's the first row, I think, then angle bracket. Sorry, the new line, angle bracket div space class points to string row, angle bracket, new line, indent, angle bracket div space class points to string call -2-3. Or is it -2-3? It's supposed to be the first column. So it's going to be the second row. They're going to add a column. Then they add a nested row and column within the second row, which gets tricky, so have a look at that, practice. I'm just going to skip the rest of the code. So then it says designing the grid rows. Grid rows contain floating columns. Let's fix this. Start the timer as well. designing the grid rows. Okay, grid rows contain floating columns. Since a grid row starts a new line within a page, it should only be displayed when both margins are clear of previously floated columns. Grid rows contain floating columns. Since a grid row starts a new line within a page, it should only be displayed when both margins are clear of previously floated columns. Since a grid row starts a new line within a page. Since a grid row starts a new line within a page. It should only be displayed if both margins are clear of previously floated columns. Okay. So now it's styles for the figure. There's a figure styles for row div elements. It says comment. Slash asterisk then space grid row styles asterisk slash. It says div dot row open a block, then it says clear colon space both semicolon. So it says that displays the row only when both margins are clear of previously floated columns. And after that it says div dot row colon after. Open a block. So clear colon space both semicolon new line content colon space quote or string empty string semicolon new line display colon space table semicolon. So that automatically expands the row to cover floating columns. So I'm not really sure what that is. You have to go back and do the code examples. Designing the grid columns. Every grid column needs to be floated within its row. Grid columns are placed within a div element having the general class name. Did say that for rows too. The grid columns are placed within a div element having the general class name. Class points to string call dash numerator dash denominator. Close the string. So that's like the general format. Back to that code for a sec. Because they don't start at 0, or they don't. So it's like 2 of 3, 1 of 2. Not row column. That's not how it is. It's different. It's a fraction, and it doesn't start at 0, it looks like. It says where numerator dash denominator provides the fractional width of columns. At least that was kind of helpful, but this is a very shitty class, I'll tell you that much. See, this shit's like they get shittier every time. It's just missing, it's missing half the stuff from the top. It's usually that's the case, that's why I never study off the notes. Last time I read both. Fucking books. And I forgot. Help me understand the code part. Which was helpful, of course, but the theories were not. Like, it was hard to remember all of them, because I read like 1,500 pages somehow. I think because the Python book was shorter. But the other book was 700 pages, so not sure how I did that. So it says designing the grid columns continued. Using arrays and stuff and not explaining it, I just probably skipped that. Like, I'm not sure what it is. It looks like it's CSS, but it's not explaining what these square brackets are and all this stuff. Might want to look at the code examples. So outlining a grid, outlines, lines drawn around an element. To outlining a grid, so outlines are lines drawn around an element. So enclosing the element content, padding, and border spaces. Outline. So supplying that is outline dash width colon. So I think it's code space value semicolon. Specifies the width of a line. Okay. So apply that. Properties of value are colon space thin, comma medium, comma or thick. New line dash outline dash color colon space color semicolon specifies the color of a line. New line. So properties of color are CSS color name or value. So hold on a second. So the next part is outlining a grid continued. Outline dash styles. So outline dash styles, colon space style semicolon, specifies the design of a line. Properties of style are solid, comma double, comma dotted, comma dash, comma groove, comma inset, comma ridge, or outset. I don't think this is really explaining much, like this is all just garbage. Imagine listening to this after and being like, well, what the hell is this? I guess it's just the format of the function. I think it's just like usually general notation is kind of it's pretty hard to understand. So outlining a grid continued. I think we just did that. So defining a CSS grid to create a grid display without the use of div elements. Use the following grid-based properties. Select or open a block, so display colon space grid semicolon. Grid dash template dash rows colon space track dash list semicolon grid dash template dash columns semicolon space track list. Not saying what track. Okay, now so it's saying this. So close the block, so it's saying that grid is a selected elements in a grid. Track dash list is a space separated list of row heights and column widths. So we're defining a CSS grid continued. FR unit represents the fraction of available space left on the grid after all rows or columns have attained their maximum allowable size. So FR unit represents the fraction of available space left on the grid after all other rows or columns have attained their maximum allowable size. Next point, for example, the following style creates for columns with the dimension specified in the style rule. So grid dash template dash columns colon. So this is a code piece, so it's grid dash template dash columns. I'm not sure where they're getting that from. You have to see the whole code, then colon space 200px space 250px space, sorry, new line, then 1fr space 2fr. So they're using that, then semicolons, so using those units that they explained. So assigning content to grid cells. Elements in a CSS grid are placed within that grid cell at the intersection of a specified row and column. Okay. So once again, it seems like the theme here is that HTML is easier than CSS. CSS is very difficult. And then it's like, so then the next point is, by default, all the specified elements are placed in the grid cell located at the intersection of the first row and first column. So by default, all the specified elements are placed in the grid cell located. It doesn't say that it starts at 0 or 1. So that's kind of dumb. So it says assigning content to grid cells. To place an element in a different cell, use grid row start. To place an element in a different cell, use grid dash row dash start. So this is code, these are code pieces. Assigning content to grid cells. To place an element in a different cell, use grid dash row dash start colon space integer semicolon. Then new line grid dash row dash end colon space integer semicolon. New line grid dash column dash start colon space integer semicolon. new line grid dash column dash end colon space integer semicolon, where integer defines the starting and ending row of column. Where integer defines the starting and ending row or column that contains the content. Now they have layout with positioning styles. So it's a figure. So the main, they have code here. So main, they open a block. It says overflow colon space auto semicolon new line. Position colon space relative semicolon new line. Height colon space 550px semicolon new line. Width colon space 100% semicolon new line close the block. So it says when overflow is set to auto, the browser automatically displays scroll bars for overflowed content. So the overflow property determines how the browser should handle content that exceeds the space allotted to the element. So relative positioning is used to shift an element from its default position in the document flow. Overflow property determines how the browser should handle content that exceeds the space allotted to the element. The overflow property determines how the browser should handle. Overflow determines how the browser should handle content that exceeds the space allotted to the element. Okay, what element though? I'm not saying what element. So relative positioning is used to shift an element from its default position in the document flow. Okay, so I think the hashtag represents the ID. So it says div hashtag info1, open a block, position colon space absolute semicolon. Then top, I'm not going to say new line anymore. So top colon space 20px semicolon. Then left colon space 5% semicolon. Close the block. Then div hashtag info2 open block, so it says position colon space absolute semicolon new line top colon space 185px semicolon and left colon space 42% semicolon. and there's some notes around it. Oh, then there's under that, so close the block, then there's div hashtag info3 open a block, so position colon space absolute semicolon top colon space 135px semicolon left colon space 75% semicolon. So it says the top property provides the top coordinate for an element using relative, absolute, or fixed positioning. It says the left property provides the left coordinate for the positioned element. Not sure what that is. And it says absolute positioning is used to place an element at specified coordinates within a container element. Absolute, yeah, that usually means specified. So they're all set to absolute. So you can use relative, absolute, or fixed. And below it says top and left values can be expressed using any of the CSS units of measure, including pixels and percentages, where a percentage represents the percent width or height of the containing element. So they have with positioning style, so they have this figure of the Pandasia chocolates or whatever. Info 1 is placed 20 pixels from the top of the main element and 5% from the left edge. So I believe these are the examples in the textbook that you're going to be doing. So it says info 2 is placed 185 pixels from the top and 42% from the left edge of the main element. Vertical scroll bar is automatically added to view the overflowed content. Info 3 is placed 135 pixels from the top and 75% from the left edge. The CSS positioning styles. You place an element at a specific position within its container use position. Colon space type semicolon. Top. Colon space value semicolon. Right. Colon space value semicolon. Bottom. Colon space value semicolon. Left. Colon space value semicolon. So within its container, as I haven't had that much, we'll haven't had practice with that yet. So it says where type indicates the kind of positioning applied to the element, and top, right, bottom, and left properties indicate the coordinates of the element. The CSS positioning styles, so static positioning. The element is placed where it would have fallen naturally within the flow of the document. So I think if you just like lay a bunch of things on like the pane or whatever, then that's, so replace them. If they just fit, then maybe that's static. If it doesn't fit on that line, then it just moves to that next one. I'm not sure if that's what they mean. So next one is relative positioning. The element is moved out of its normal position in the document flow. The element is moved out of its normal position. Out of its normal position in the document flow. The element is moved out of its normal position in the document flow. So I'm not sure what they mean by that. Then they have absolute positioning. The element is placed at specific coordinates within containers. They have a figure of that. Moving an object using relative positioning. So it says original layout on the left and layout on the right is object is shifted 250 pixels down and 450 pixels to the right from its default position. 250 pixels, 450 pixels. Other page elements retain their original positions. Okay. So CSS positioning styles continued. That says moving an object using absolute positioning. So that was used moving an object using relative positioning. So it said the other page elements move into the space previously occupied by the now absolutely occupied object. So other page elements move into the space previously occupied by the now absolutely positioned object. It says top left corner of object place 620 pixels down and 30 pixels to the right of the top left edge of the web page. So that's layout under absolute positioning. So fixed and inherited positioning. Fixed positioning fixes an object within a browser window to avoid its movement. Inherited positioning allows an element to inherit the position value of its parent element. Okay. Using the positioning styles. Setting the display styles of the main element. So this div dot info box space open a block display colon space non semicolon close a block. So that hides the div elements of the info box class. Okay. Main styles is comment in a comment main styles. Then under that main open a block position colon space relative semicolon. So you're seeing the same thing over and over again. Position, height, width, and all that. Then height dash 1400 px semicolon and width colon space 100% semicolon close the block. So it says sets the height of the main element to 1400 pixels and makes the width of the page body. Makes it the width of the page body. Places the main element using relative positioning. I think that's 30 minutes here, so we'll just cut it off. So we have to go, so we'll just finish the last part after. How many pages got? 1, 2, 3, maybe 10 pages left.